Who is Robert Oppenheimer? Now I Am Death. Oppenheimer, by Christopher Nolan, which focuses on the invention and development of the atomic bomb, was released in the cinema. So, who is Oppenheimer, the name on the agenda? Who is Oppenheimer? In summary, the film tells the story of the enigmatic scientist known as the father of the first nuclear bomb and the discovery of the atomic bomb. Oppenheimer is known as the scientist who helped create the weapon that ended a war, destroyed 2 cities, and ushered in a dangerous new era. But who was Oppenheimer? Here is Oppenheimer's biography. J. Robert Oppenheimer, or Julius Robert in full, is an American theoretical physicist. Born in New York in 1904, Oppenheimer was the child of a first-generation German Jewish immigrant family in the textile trade, BBC reported. His childhood friends described him as generous despite his luxurious upbringing. One school friend described him as extraordinarily easy to blush, very thin, very rosy-cheeked, very shy, but also very intelligent. His academic skills emerged at a very early age. By age 10, Oppenheimer was studying minerals, physics, and chemistry. He graduated at the top of his high school class in 1921. However, he contracted a near-fatal case of dysentery and had to postpone his enrollment at Harvard. Oppenheimer enrolled at Harvard in September 1922 and graduated in 3 years. Although Oppenheimer specialized in chemistry, he eventually realized that his true passion was physics. In 1925, Oppenheimer began graduate work in physics at the Cavendish Laboratory in Cambridge, England. J.J. Thomson, who was awarded the 1906 Nobel Prize in Physics for his discovery of the electron, agreed to take Oppenheimer as a student. At Cavendish, Oppenheimer realized that his talent was in theoretical physics, not experimental physics, and accepted an invitation from Max Born, director of the Institute for Theoretical Physics at the University of Göttingen, to work with him in Germany. Oppenheimer received his doctorate in 1927 at the age of 23. He became a professor in 1936. At Berkeley, he became good friends with Ernest Lawrence, one of the world's best experimental physicists and inventor of the cyclotron. According to Britannica, in the 1920s, the new quantum and relativity theories were attracting scientific interest. Oppenheimer's early research was especially devoted to the energy processes of subatomic particles, including electrons, positrons, and cosmic rays. He also studied neutron stars and black holes. Since quantum theory had only been proposed a few years earlier, his position at the university allowed him to devote his entire career to exploring and developing the full meaning of this theory. Oppenheimer was engaging and trained a generation of U.S. physicists who were impressed by his leadership and intellectual qualities. He also met Jean Tatlock, a psychiatrist and physician, with whom he fell in love in the mid-1930s. He proposed to Tatlock on more than one occasion but was rejected. Oppenheimer married biologist Katherine Harrison in 1940. Oppenheimer was also fond of literature. According to the BBC, in the early 1930s, while strengthening his academic career, he discovered Hindu sacred texts and learned Sanskrit to read the untranslated Bhagavad Gita. It was from it that he would later make his famous quote, "Now I am death." Nuclear bomb warning by physicists. According to Britannica, after the invasion of Poland by Nazi Germany in 1939, physicists Albert Einstein, Leo Szilard, and Eugene Wigner warned the U.S. government that if the Nazis were the first to build a nuclear bomb, it would threaten all of humanity. Beginning with Einstein's letter, the warnings brought the physicists' concerns about the nuclear threat to the U.S. government's agenda. Eventually, the U.S. president was persuaded to take action. Oppenheimer was one of the few scientists assigned to investigate the potential for nuclear weapons. According to the BBC, Oppenheimer began work when his name was mentioned as the leader of the project and told a friend, "I am cutting off all my communist connections. If I don't do this, the government will find it difficult to use me." I don't want to let anything interfere with my usefulness to the nation." Einstein later made the following comment: "Oppenheimer's problem is that he loves something that does not love him, the US government." After the United States joined the Allies in 1941, Oppenheimer was asked to join the top-secret Manhattan Project, whose aim was to develop an atomic weapon. It seems that his ambition, as well as his knowledge, influenced this assignment. In 1942, the U.S. Army summoned Oppenheimer to head the secret laboratory where the bomb would be tested. By the autumn of 1942, when the Manhattan Project was launched, Oppenheimer was already regarded as an exceptional theoretical physicist and was involved in exploring the possibility of an atomic bomb. Less than 3 years after General Leslie Groves chose Oppenheimer to lead the project, the United States would drop 2 atomic bombs on Japan. First trial. On July 16, 1945, Oppenheimer and his entourage gathered at the Trinity test site south of Los Alamos for the world's first attempt at a nuclear explosion. The test was to take place on the sands of the Jornada del Muerto Desert in New Mexico. Oppenheimer, 1.78 meters tall, had always been thin, but in 3 years as director of Project Y, which designed and built the bomb, he had dropped to under 52 kilograms. He had slept only 4 hours that night. As the countdown continued, he was so tense he could hardly breathe. Scientists knew that this bomb would shape the future of the world. But they also believed it could end World War II. Now I am death. The test, conducted in secret, worked. In an interview in 1965, Oppenheimer said that in the moments after the explosion, a line from the Hindu holy book Bhagavad Gita came to mind: "Now I am death, destroyer of worlds." I think we all thought that in one way or another. According to the BBC, his friends said that in the days that followed he became increasingly somber and depressed, because he knew what was going to happen. "Those poor people," he said one morning, referring to what would happen to the Japanese. However, according to his biography, his reactions were puzzling and tidal. His biographers also found it difficult to describe him. Because after a while, at a meeting, he focused on the importance of providing the appropriate conditions for the bomb to be dropped and said, they should not drop it in the rain or fog. Don't explode it too high, otherwise the target will not be damaged. Atomic bombs dropped on Japan. On August 6 and August 9, 1945, the United States dropped 2 of the bombs Oppenheimer had helped develop on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Tens of thousands of people lost their lives in the explosions that destroyed both cities on an unprecedented scale of destruction. According to National Geographic, Oppenheimer served on the scientific committee that advised the War Department to drop the bomb on Japan as soon as possible. Historical controversy continues over whether the government listened to the scientists' pleas that the bomb be dropped only on military targets, or even publicly tested beforehand to force Japan to surrender. Geographic provides the following information: on the night of the Hiroshima bombing, Oppenheimer was applauded by a group of scientists at Los Alamos and explained that his only regret was that the bomb was not finished in time to use it against Germany. But while excited by their achievement, the scientists were horrified by the loss of civilian lives in the attack and worried that the future of the weapons would encourage future wars rather than deter them. A few weeks after the bombing, Oppenheimer wrote a letter to the Secretary of War stating that the security of this nation cannot rest wholly, or even mainly, on its scientific or technical skill. It can rest only on making future wars impossible. Oppenheimer also defended the Manhattan Project and the bomb he was commissioned to build, saying that it was necessary to fully understand the possibilities of nuclear science. I feel blood on my hands. The atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima had changed the world. According to the Washington Post, Oppenheimer celebrated the applause of the crowd at Los Alamos by clasping his hands. But Oppenheimer's sense of triumph evaporated in the months after the devastation caused by another atomic bomb dropped on Nagasaki 3 days after Hiroshima. He seemed depressed. President Harry S. Truman asked him what was wrong when they met for the first time at the White House in October 1945. According to a 2005 biography of Oppenheimer, Oppenheimer told Truman, "Mr. President, I feel I have blood on my hands." Truman told Oppenheimer not to carry the burden of the bombs. "I told him that the blood was on my hands and to let me worry about it." Truman was offended by this behavior and referred to Oppenheimer as a whiny scientist to his aides, and even swore that he never wanted to see him in the office again. It was their only meeting, and Oppenheimer believed he had missed perhaps his only chance to prevent a potential nuclear arms race that could have killed hundreds of millions of people. Charles Oppenheimer, the physicist's grandson, told the Washington Post, he couldn't convince the president, and unfortunately the president didn't like him. "My grandfather gave the right advice, but the president ignored it. What he said about getting blood on his hands was something Truman didn't like," he said. Oppenheimer spent much of his life after the war lobbying for nuclear deterrence and opposed U.S. attempts to develop a more powerful hydrogen bomb. He suggested that the U.S. should consider using nuclear weapons only tactically, and that nuclear technology should instead be used in other areas, such as power generation. Oppenheimer made political enemies when he opposed the development of the hydrogen bomb. Historian Alex Wellerstein said in an interview, "He doesn't fall into easy categories like pro-nuclear, anti-nuclear or anything like that. He is a difficult figure." Oppenheimer, together with Albert Einstein, Bertrand Russell, and Joseph Rotblat, founded the World Academy of Arts and Sciences in 1960. He continued to lecture around the world and was awarded the Enrico Fermi Prize in 1963. He died of throat cancer in 1967. Changing moods. According to the Washington Post, the depression and overwhelming anxiety that Robert Oppenheimer felt during the development and testing of the bomb seemed to dissipate after the announcer at Los Alamos Laboratory shouted a single word on August 6, 1945. According to author Ferenc M. Zaz in his 1984 book, The Day the Sun Rose Twice, an enormous burst of light was followed by the deep roar of the explosion over Hiroshima. An estimated 135,000 people had died. Oppenheimer was relieved and felt good. "I will never forget his walk," Isidore Rabi, a close confidant and colleague of Oppenheimer, recounts in Monk's book. "I'll never forget the way he got out of the car. He had made it." His mood changed 3 days later when the FBI described Oppenheimer as neurotic for arguing that the bombing of Nagasaki was not militarily justified. The second atomic bomb was dropped on August 9, 1945, killing an estimated 64,000 more people. After the bombing of Nagasaki, Oppenheimer, who smoked constantly out of remorse, sent a letter to Secretary of War Henry Stimson on August 17, 1945, demanding a ban on nuclear weapons. Oppenheimer resigned as director of Los Alamos.